Today we're talking about the DJI Osmo Pocket. I'm here with Dave from Kinotika. Thank you. There's basically an update to this camera and they've resolved a lot of the issues that I originally found when I first was testing it. So we're gonna play with it today, see if this update made a big difference and just test out some of the functionalities, especially for, you know, professional use, because there's some really awesome opportunities by using this little camera. So this video is gonna be more of an overall review of this camera and just after working with it a few times, you know, my honest opinions about whether I like this camera or not. Also, before we get started, we are doing a giveaway for a DJI Osmo Pocket, so make sure you head down to the description. I'll put a link to that for your chance to win an Osmo Pocket this holiday season. So there are some major updates to this firmware, which is pretty awesome that DJI has pumped out a new set of updates before this camera has even been released to the public yet, which is pretty awesome. So we're gonna go through these updates and just the changes that have been made, as well as we're gonna talk about the stability, the audio, and the overall use and who this camera is for. Also, I've received a bunch of requests for people that want to play with the raw footage. So down in the description, I'll put a link to a Dropbox folder where you guys can download the footage and play with it so you can see it outside of the compressed world of YouTube. So you guys can color grade it, test the footage, and really see the limitations that you have with this footage. Okay, so if you haven't seen my other video about the flaws, you can check that out. I'll put a link down below as well as up in the card. But basically, this little guy has had a few things that have changed. First, the big elephant in the room, they fixed the 120, so now you can shoot 120 frames per second at 1080p. And also they've done an update for audio, so now the audio is supposed to be a little bit better. And then they also updated some button functionality, so now you don't need like the extra accessories to make everything work. You just have a couple buttons right here on the front, and it can recenter, it can flip the camera, all the things that like just makes this so useful. And just using this little tiny camera, it's crazy what you can do with this. So let me show you how this little thing works. Basically, you have your two buttons, and this is just in the normal setup. You don't have all the little extra pieces added on, but basically you have a record button and you have a function button. And now the function button, you click it once, it changes the mode. So we go from like photo to video. You click it twice, it recenters the camera. You click it 3 times and it comes back, and now you have selfie mode. So it's set up to be used very easily. You click it 3 times again, it goes back, which is always helpful. Now the screen is also a touch screen. So you swipe over, you get some added features like time lapse, slow-mo, all that good stuff. You can go just swipe up to some different functions, swipe left, and then you get, you know, footage that we've already shot. Swipe down and you got your settings and a few other aspects for this camera. Super simple. It works very well in terms of just using it. You don't have to do a lot of menus to get to what you need to be able to get this thing to work properly. So that's one reason why I really like this and why it's just so easy and simple to use. So now it's time to test out the slow-mo capabilities of this camera. We're gonna shoot 1080, 120 frames per second, get that super buttery slow motion. I'm also gonna shoot in log, do a little color grading so you guys can see that and see how this performs. Okay, so going through this footage, there's a few things that actually really stand out to me. First off, 1080p, 120 frames per second, it looks a little mushy. When you start punching in, you can see how there's not a ton of information in this footage. And you really see this when you start color grading. So when you're shooting in the flatter profile, you gotta grade it, obviously, to make it look good. The issue is you can't really push it very far before the image starts breaking apart. And with that, you see a lot of noise in the footage. So 120 frames per second is definitely an awesome added bonus to this little camera. However, the footage is not that good. It's okay, it's usable. I think if you were to use this in like bright sunlight, then you'd be able to get some awesome footage out of it. But today it was a little bit of a cloudy day, and you could just tell that there's a lot of noise in this footage. So that is one thing to note. So on one of my other videos, I was getting a lot of comments about the sky blowing out quickly in the standard profile. You obviously have less dynamic range when you shoot in the standard mode, and that's to be expected for sure. However, the beauty of this little guy is that you can shoot in log, so you can preserve some of those highlights and be able to color grade later. However, you're not gonna have a ton of room to color grade with this camera. You can tweak the image, you can play with the contrast, saturation, colors, all that good stuff, but if you start pushing the grade too far, the image does start to break apart. So this isn't isn't a camera where I'd expect to do like heavy grades on. This is definitely something where you can use that log profile if you're shooting outdoors, if you're shooting in bright skies, so that you can preserve some of that color that's out in the sky. However, in most other situations, I would probably just shoot this camera in the standard profile because you're not gonna have a ton of room to color grade in post. Okay, so when you pair it with your phone, it's actually really quite convenient to use. It's just a quick little dongle thing that you plug in, but when you're using it, you have a giant screen, so it actually makes it a much more usable camera in terms of seeing what you're doing. The issue is all the pro settings are only accessible through the phone. So if you wanted to shoot like your cine-like, your more log style, you have to connect a phone before you can actually shoot in that format. That's one thing that hopefully they change in an upcoming software update, is that you have more options actually on the device, because I don't always want to have to pull out my phone to be able to get some of these settings. However, when working with the phone, you can actually get much better shots because you can actually see what you're doing, and you know, it's very easy to use actually. I do enjoy the experience of working with the phone and this. So you can see it just kind of hangs out and it's like all one camera. The screen on the Osmo Pocket itself is great just to use as a reference. Now, you can't really see focus, you can't really see what's going on when you're looking at that screen. You could just kind of reframe and just make sure that you're getting the shot that you want to get. Next, we're gonna look at some vlogging footage, and you can tell, like, when I was shooting, I'm out of focus. Now, we can't figure out what the issue is here because when Dave shot, he was in focus. And when we're looking at this footage side by side, we're not really sure why my footage is out of focus, and it's not something you can see on that little screen. All right guys, so now I am vlogging on the little Osmo Pocket. This thing is awesome because you have this little screen. It does face tracking. Right now I'm tracking and it looks like it's following me. Now I can't tell you if it's in focus or not because I am, you know, looking at this little tiny screen. So that's one thing that bugs me about this camera, is that I've shot multiple times and it's been out of focus. And one time it was with sunglasses, so it could have been the sunglasses causing the issue. But today there was no issues with sunglasses. I was in mixed lighting, so I was going in and out of brighter exposure to less exposure, and it still could not find me, yet it was still tracking my face.
So one of the things that DJI told me they've fixed with this firmware is the audio. So how does this sound? Does it sound any better than the audio that I got with the previous firmware? If you haven't seen that video, then click the link in the description or the icon above. You can see the GoPro comparison, where the audio is pretty dang bad. So also another thing that they said they fixed with this firmware is the autofocus. So is my face in focus? I think the closer I get to my face, we're dealing with some minimum focus.
Vlog on vlog.
That's a vlog on vlog.
Let's see if we go closer. So if we're this close.
Am I in focus? I can see that the exposure is all over the place. This is full auto everything.
Now let's go back out here. Let's find a contrast. So now it's much more contrasty. You can't see my face as well. Let's see if the focus is still holding on. What if I dip out? So it works really nicely in terms of following. I can see on the little screen that everywhere I move, the camera just kind of comes with me. That's awesome. I do really like that feature about this. And we're obviously testing the audio as well. So here's the audio just straight from the GoPro. This is my entire, GoPro setup here. So I pulled it off. This is just me holding the GoPro, so you guys have a comparison of what the GoPro audio is compared to the DJI Osmo Pocket. I will say with this firmware update, they've majorly improved the audio. So I don't think you necessarily need a dongle at the bottom to have good audio out of the Osmo Pocket. It's not a camera where you would do this whole setup. I think the strength of this camera is the fact that it's so small, so you can get good audio just from the camera itself. The only thing that I might add would be like a little windscreen over that little microphone, just because in wind sounds, you're probably gonna get some wind with the little hole. However, as a whole, I think this is a good camera to be used for vlogging because it's quick and easy. You can get some awesome shots. The audio sounds good. It's set up for vlogging because the screen's facing you, the microphone's on the side of the screen. So this is definitely a good option for vloggers. I'm really curious to play with the dongle on the bottom and a microphone. And when all the accessories come out, it's obviously gonna change the way that we use this camera. But as a pocket camera, you can pop this out, you can get good vlog footage, and you can get good audio out of it. So I think it's definitely something to consider if you are someone who does do some vlogging content. Okay, so after shooting with the Osmo Pocket with the phone attached, you know, we've been just running around getting different styles of shots. The one thing that bothers me is the phone doesn't tilt, so it would be cool if like on the actual Osmo could move the screen up and down, because it's hard to see the footage if you are to tilt down or up. Just one thing I noticed when actually using it with the phone and like shooting with it, as soon as you start tilting it in one direction, you're gonna lose your picture because you have to like duck down or get above it. One thing I really like about working with the app is this little dial that you have on the screen. Now, when you push this anywhere on the screen, the camera moves. So when you're using the phone, you can do these really cool like pans and tilts by just setting down the camera and then moving your finger around the screen. And obviously, the further you pull it away from that center mark, the faster it's gonna go. So you can use this camera and get some cool shots when you set it down and use the phone in this way. Now, to access any of the pro features, you have to have the phone attached. So if you want to control your shutter speed or your ISO or your color settings, you have to attach the phone, set it up, and then unplug your phone. Hopefully they'll do a software update where you can just do this on the actual Osmo itself, because it would make a lot more sense to be able to just have access to that on the actual unit. One thing that is really frustrating about this camera is that when you shoot in 120 frames per second, it punches in. So you could see that there's a major crop when you're shooting slow motions. Now, in terms of bounciness, I think this camera has improved. And what I mean by that is like the little shutter that happens from the stabilization. In the last firmware, you can see how people were bouncing around a lot. Whereas with this firmware, it seems like they've improved it. I don't know how they did that. It's something with the stabilization. But also something to keep in mind is that this is an f2.0 lens, which means that to compensate for such a wide open aperture, the camera has to boost the shutter speed way high, which gives you that kind of electronic jittery look. I'm really excited to play with this with ND filters when you can get your shutter speed down to 1/60th or 1/48th, because what's gonna happen is it's gonna smooth out a lot of this mechanical feeling that you see in the footage. So I think once ND filters are available, it's gonna change the look of this, and it's gonna look much more cinematic in terms of the motion blur in the footage. So overall, I think that this is a very solid choice of camera. There is nothing like this out there on the market. A gimbal this small that has this many features is just unheard of. So 4K 60 is amazing. I think that you can definitely integrate this footage into some of your professional work. Now, you're never gonna show up to a shoot and pop this out and be like, all right guys, let's shoot with my gimbal, because it's just so tiny. It's almost laughable how small it is. However, the footage looks pretty amazing. So personally, I think that this camera has a wide range of uses, and I don't think there's one style of shooter that's gonna like this more than another. I think that everyone can have this in their pocket, and then when they need a stable shot, pull it out. For travel vloggers, for people that are always on the go, I definitely think you can replace your gimbal if you're using one for like your GoPro or like a smaller camera. If you like carrying around your big massive gimbal, then that's different. Then, you know, you obviously get better footage when you put a DSLR or a mirrorless on a gimbal, and you can get that better quality of footage. However, the footage out of this camera works great. So anyone who wants to lighten their load, have a smaller package, this is the camera to go for. So for me personally, when I want to keep things small and light, I can definitely see myself traveling with the Mavic Air, the DJI Osmo Pocket, and then like my GH5 to obviously get all the other footage that these kind of cameras can't get. And that would be a very small package in your backpack. That would be like next to nothing, which is pretty awesome to have all these different capabilities in such small devices. I think as time goes on, we're gonna see this camera improve. We're gonna see better sensors go in this small body, and I'm really excited to see what DJI has in store in terms of just updating the firmware and keep improving this little camera. But down the road, Osmo Pocket 2, Osmo Pocket 3, whenever we can get that 1-inch sensor in this little tiny pocket camera, I think there's gonna be some really cool products coming in the future. Guys, if you wanna see more footage and more reviews around the DJI Osmo Pocket, I'll put a link down in the description to Kinotika's channel. They've done a bunch of different comparisons and different reviews. I'll just put links to all the different videos. You guys could get the full picture of this camera and see if it's a good fit for you. Also, make sure you enter our giveaway. We're giving away one person a DJI Osmo Pocket this holiday season, so one of you will get this, and that link is also down below in the description. Guys, that is it. If you're new here to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I do a lot of awesome gear reviews, filmmaking tutorials, and I also just like going on adventures, and definitely I'm gonna be taking the Osmo Pocket with me on some adventures in the future. Also, if you're looking to have a career as a filmmaker or creator, make sure you check out my course, creatorfilmschool.com. And guys, that's it. I'll see you on the next one.